Lianggu production at Fei Gu Literature, March in a Small Town, author, Xiaohong. 1. The fields in March are already green as lichen, showing here and there. The grass on the outskirts has to make several turns before it can emerge from the ground, and the grass's head is still carrying the bulging shell of the seed grain. The sprouts, which were more than an inch high, happily emerged from the soil. The children who were herding cattle found a grass sprout when they lifted up the tiles under the skirting boards. The children came home and told their mother, a grass sprout was unearthed today. The mother said in surprise, that must be Xiangyang place. The white pebble-like seeds of root vegetables are rolling on the ground, and wild children are picking them up by the bucketful. Dandelions are sprouting, sheep are bleating, crows are flying around the poplar trees. The weather is getting warmer day by day, and every day is interesting every inch. Young flowers are flying all over the sky and shining like cotton. People always catch it with their hands when they go out, and Yang Hua is hanging on him. Grass and cow dung were lying on the road, emitting a strong smell, and the sound of pebbles hitting boats in the distance was empty. A loud noise came. The ice in the river has grown, and the ice blocks are pushing against the ice blocks, flowing downward in a depressed and unrestrained manner. A crow stands on the ice looking for small fish to eat. Or a frog still hibernating. The weather has suddenly become hot, and it is said to be February and August, Indian spring. Naturally, cold weather is still coming, but it has been very hot these days. Spring comes with a strong call from one end to the other. The small town was filled with poplars, even before the elm trees turned yellow. The streets and alleys were flying everywhere, like falling snow. Spring is here, and everyone seems to have been waiting for a long time for a big riot. It will be held tonight. Everyone is in a criminal mood and wants to participate in the attempt of liberation. Spring blows into everyone's heart, with a call and a puzzle. I have an aunt. My cousin and I are probably in love. My aunt was originally a very close relative, my mother's sister. But my aunt, she is not my biological aunt, she is my stepmother's daughter. So she can be considered to have some blood relationship with my stepmother, but actually she doesn't. Because I came to my grandfather's house after my grandmother was already a widow, and Aunt Shui was this grandmother's daughter who was born in another family. Aunt Shui also has a younger sister. Her sister is 2 years younger than her, about 17 or 18 years old, so Aunt Shui is 18 or 19 years old. Aunt Shui is not very beautiful, but she is slim, walks calmly and beautifully, and speaks clearly with a calm emotion. When she reached for the cherry to eat, it seemed as if her fingertips were pitiful for the cherry. She squeezed it gently as if she was afraid of damaging it. If someone greets her from behind, if she is walking, she will stop. If she is eating, she will put down her rice bowl, and then turn her head towards her shoulder without turning her whole body. So she consciously closed her lips, as if she had something to say but couldn't say it for the moment. As for Aunt Shui's sister, I forgot her name. Anyway, she is a loud talker and laughs. She is not very trim and is completely different from her sister. The flowers can be green, red, purple, whatever is popular in the market. She doesn't have much choice, and she wears a piece of clothing as soon as she makes one. After putting it on, she would visit her relatives, and when people would compliment her on how beautiful the fabric was, she would always say that there was another one exactly like this and she gave it to her sister. I went to my grandfather's house. There was no girl of my age in my grandfather's house to play with me, so whenever I went there, my grandmother would always call Aunt Shui to accompany me. Aunt Shui lived in my grandfather's backyard, separated by a board wall, and she came as soon as she said hello. The courtyard where my grandfather lived and the courtyard where Aunt Shui lived. Although there is only a board wall between them, there is no door leading to it, so you have to go around to the street and enter through the main entrance. So sometimes Aunt Shui came to the board wall first, greeted me through the cracks in the board wall, then went back to the house to decorate it, and then walked around the street to her mother's house. Aunt Shui likes me very much because I am studying in school and she is not. I understand everything she thinks better than her. So she always discussed many matters with me to see what my opinion was. At night, I stayed at my grandfather's house, and she stayed with me. We talk every time after falling asleep. We talked for half the night, but for some reason we couldn't finish the conversation. The initial discussion was about how to wear clothes, what color to wear, and what kind of material to wear. For example, whether walking should be fast or slow. Sometimes she bought a pin during the day and took it out at night to look at it. Ask me whether this brooch looks good or not. At that time, about 15 years ago, we didn't know how to dress up a woman elsewhere, but in this city almost everyone had a wide velvet knotted shawl. Blue, purple, and various colors, but at most they are maroon. Almost all you see on the street are large maroon shawls. Even though there are so many red and green ones, maroon is not the most popular. Aunt Shui's sister has one, Aunt Shui has one, and almost all of my classmates have one. Even my grandmother, who was not well dressed, had one draped over her shoulders. It's just that the clothes are blue, and no one dares to use the most popular maroon red. Because she was finally a little older and gave in to the young people. It was also popular to wear velvet rope shoes at that time, so Aunt Cui's sister quickly bought them and put them on. Because she is very careless. She doesn't care whether it's good or bad, it's just that she has what others have. Others wear clothes, but Aunt Shui's sister seems to be dressed in clothes, messy. But it always complies with the principle of having everything you need. I bought Aunt Shui's sister's velvet rope shoes and put them on. Running on the floor, it didn't take long. There was a fur ball tied on the face of each shoe. One of the fur balls had left the shoe and was jumping upwards. There was only a rope attached to it, otherwise it would fall off. It's very fun, it's like a big red date is tied to the foot. Because her shoes are also maroon. Everyone was laughing at her that her shoes were broken as soon as she bought them. Aunt Shui, she didn't buy it. She hesitated for a long time. No matter what new things arrived, she never bought them quickly. Maybe she already liked them in her heart, but she seemed to be opposed to them. It seems like she doesn't even accept it. She had to wait until many people started buying, and it seemed that she was a little tempted at this time. It's like buying velvet rope shoes. She talked to me at night and asked my opinion, and I said they looked good. Many of my classmates also bought velvet rope shoes. The next day Aunt Shui asked me to accompany her on the street. Without telling me what to buy, I went into the store and spent a long time choosing other items before asking about my velvet rope shoes. I went to several stores and found none. They all said they were sold out. I know the people in the store are talking nonsense like this. It means that his store usually has the most abundant items, but this is what you want. He is gone. I advised Aunt Shui that we should leave slowly. There will definitely be someone else. We took a carriage from my grandfather's house at the end of the street to the center of the street. When we saw the first shop, we got off the carriage. Needless to say, we have already paid for the carriage. When we come back after shopping, we will call another one. Because we don't know how long it will take. Maybe you see something nice and you want to buy it even if you don't need it, or you have already bought all the things and don't need to linger any longer, but you still want to linger for a while, or the purpose of buying things is just a pair of shoes. But instead of buying the shoes, Rolly Rosso bought a lot of unnecessary things. On this day, we dismissed the carriage and entered the first store. This is not the case in other big cities, but it is often like this in my hometown. You have to pay for the carriage ride. Let him be free to solicit business, but he will often still wait outside the shop door, and when you come out, he will still invite you to sit in his car. We walked into the first shop and asked if there was one. So I looked at other things, from silk and satin to woolen cloth, from woolen cloth to silk satin, but I didn't look at cloth at all. It's not like mothers who go into a store and buy one to make quilts and the other to make quilts, because we can't take care of the quilts and quilts. Mothers don't go into the store for a month, but when they do, they think they should buy something if it's cheap, or they should buy something if it's not expensive. For example, a piece of floral fabric is only used in summer. Mothers bought them in winter, saying they bought more while they were cheap and would always need them. But that's not the case for us. We go into the store every day, looking for something good-looking, expensive and valuable. Normally, we will never use anything unexpected. That day we came back with a lot of lace, with laces nailed to them and glazed ones. I can't tell you what kind of clothes I should make to match this kind of lace. Maybe I didn't even think about making clothes, so I bought the lace rashly. While buying, I said yes. Aunt Shui said yes, and I said yes too. Later. When I got home, I opened it in public for everyone to judge. Every word I said, and every word I said, everyone was at a loss of ideas, and felt 5 or 6 points empty. So they quickly packed it up, or snatched it from other people's hands, wrapped it up, and told them that they didn't know the goods and wouldn't let them see it. He said reluctantly, "We are going to make a red gold velvet robe and trim it with this black glass border. Or, let's give this red one away." Even though I still say this, I feel 89% empty in my heart, probably because these beloved ones will never show up again from now on. In this small town. After all, there weren't many shops, and later on, I couldn't see the velvet rope shoes, so I was anxious. Maybe I could run faster, and after a while, there were only 3 or 2 stores left. And those 3 or 2 shops are not frequented. The shops are small and the goods are few. Even if you want to come to it, you will definitely not find it. We walked into a small shop, and sure enough there were 3 or 4 pairs that were either small or large, and the colors were not good looking. Aunt Shui wanted to buy it, but I felt strange. I didn't like it very much. Since there was no good one, why should I buy it? Let me say that I didn't buy it and went home. 2 days passed. I had long forgotten about buying shoes. Aunt Shui suddenly proposed to buy it again. From then on, I knew her secret. She had fallen in love with those suede shoes a long time ago, but she didn't say it out loud. The secret of her love was like this, and she seemed to take it to the grave. She never said it out loud, as if there was no one in the world worthy of listening to what she had to say. There was heavy snow flying outside, and Aunt Shui and I went to buy velvet rope shoes in a carriage. We were wrapped in leather mattresses, and the driver sat high on the driver's platform, swaying and singing a hoarse folk song. Drink up. The wind whistled in our ears, and the heavy snow falling from the sky confused our eyes. The sky in the distance was hidden in the clouds and mist. I silently wished Aunt Shui to buy a lovely velvet soon. Rope shoes, I sincerely hope that she will be saved. The city center stands dimly in the distance, with very few pedestrians. The whole street was silent. We went from house to house and asked. I was more eager than she was. I wanted to buy it as soon as possible. I carefully questioned the shop assistants. I never give up a small opportunity. I encouraged Aunt Shui and never forgot one house. It made her a little surprised. Why did I suddenly become so enthusiastic? But I didn't care about her suspicion at all. I desperately wanted to find a pair of suede shoes in this small town. Only our carriage, carrying Aunt Cui's wish, was running particularly soberly and very fast on the street. The snow is falling harder. There was no one on the street except the 2 of us, hurrying up and down the carriage driver. It was very late and I didn't buy any shoes. Aunt Shui looked deeply into my eyes and said, "My life will not be fine." I really wanted to pretend to be an adult and comfort her. But before I could find the right words, the tears started to flow. March 2nd in the small town. 2. Aunt Shui often came to live at my house from now on. It was my stepmother who brought her here. Because her sister was engaged, I was afraid that once she got married, she would suddenly be left alone, which would make her sad. Because there are not many people in her family, only her grandfather who is over 60 years old, and an aunt who is also a widow, and she takes care of her daughter. The cousins were supposed to play together to relieve their boredom, but because their personalities were so different, they always lived in incompatible ways. I have seen her cousin who always wears dark clothes and has a dark face. She sits in the house with her mother all day long. When her mother washes clothes, she also washes clothes. When her mother cries, she cries too. Maybe she was helping her mother cry about her dead father, or maybe she was crying because their family was poor. Then others won't know. Originally the daughters of the same family, Aunt Shui and the two sisters looked like young ladies from a wealthy family, while the cousin looked like a country girl. This gave her the right to come and stay in our home frequently. Her biological sister is engaged and will be married in a year. During this year, my sister became extremely wealthy because her husband's family came with a betrothal gift as soon as they got engaged. In this city, there used to be no big foreign currency bills, but the posts issued by Guangxin Company, which were worth $101,000. Her sister's betrothal gift was probably tens of thousands of coins. So she suddenly became very upset and bought something like this today. I'll buy that tomorrow, flower brooches one after another, silk headbands, tassel earrings, foreign watches, everything. Whenever she and her sister go out on the street, she always pays the taxi fare. Her sister wants to pay, but she refuses in every possible way, sometimes in front of people. The elder sister must pay, but the younger sister will definitely refuse. As a result, she will be embarrassed. The elder sister feels that a kind of right has been deprived of her. But regarding her sister's engagement, Aunt Shui was not envious at all. She had seen her sister's future husband. He was not good-looking. He was very tall and wore a blue robe and a black mantle. He looks like a businessman and a little country gentleman. In addition, Aunt Shui is too young to think of a husband or marriage. Therefore, although her sister is getting richer and richer day by day beside her, and she is rich, she has not examined why her sister is rich. So before her sister left her, she definitely didn't take the engagement seriously. Even though her sister was already married, she still didn't pay attention to the engagement. But she often feels lonely. She and her sister came in, but because of the lonely family environment, they were like twins. Now I went to one. Not only did Aunt Shui find it monotonous, but her grandfather also felt that she was pitiful. So since her sister got married, she rarely goes home and always lives at her mother's house. Sometimes my stepmother also takes her to our house. Aunt Shui is very smart. She can play the dajing qin. It is a Japanese harp that was popular in China a few years ago. She can also play the flute or flute. But there was a lot of time to play the piano. When we lived at my house, my uncle would play these instruments with us every time after dinner. Flute, shao, Japanese harp, harmonium, banjo, and other instruments. There are no real Western musical instruments. During such a lively time, Aunt Shui also came to participate. Aunt Shui played a piece of music and immediately cooperated with all of us. So everyone felt that it was within the old tune that we had become familiar with every day. There is a new trick. So we immediately redoubled our efforts. The flute player played the flute very loudly, vibrating the membrane until it seemed to burst. The 10-year-old brother was playing the harmonica. He shook his head as if he wanted to swallow the harmonica. As for what tune he was playing, no one noticed. When everyone suddenly got the courage, it seemed that this kind of nonsense was all that was needed. And the person who was pressing the organ, because he pressed it faster and faster, he might not be able to find the keys in the end, but the pedal was pedaling faster and faster, making a whining sound. It was as if they were deliberately trying to destroy the organ and tear it apart. The song probably played was Three Plum Blossoms, and I don't know how many rounds it was played in succession, but everyone didn't want to stop. But later on, I really had no strength left. Those who couldn't find the beat couldn't find the beat, and those who couldn't keep up with the tune couldn't keep up. So everyone stopped while laughing. I don't know why, in such a happy tone, everyone felt a little sad. Maybe it was because we were so happy that we became sad. We all laughed so hard that we shed tears and laughed at the same time. At this time, we looked at the door and window and saw that my youngest brother, who had just learned to walk, was also attending with a big broken accordion on his back. Everyone knows that the accordion never plays. Made everyone laugh to death. I was happy this time. My brother, uncle's son, plays the piano very well. He was the best at playing the flute. At this time, he put down the flute and said to Aunt Shui, "Come and play." But Aunt Shui was speechless, stood up, and ran to her house. My brother, it's been a long, long time. Watch the curtain. March 3rd in the small town. 3. Aunt Shui is at my house and lives in the same room as me. On a moonlit night, the house is brightly lit. When Aunt Shui and I talked, we often talked about the crow of roosters, and I thought it was just midnight. The rooster crowed, and then he said, "Go to sleep, it's dawn." Sometimes, when she turns around, she asks me again, "Is it bad for a man to marry too early?" Maybe it's bad for a woman to marry too early. We've talked a lot before, but not about this. We always talk about things, how to wear clothes, how to buy shoes, how to match colors. When we buy wool, what pattern should be made on the wool? When we buy a hat, we should judge that the hat still has some shortcomings. What exactly are these shortcomings? Place. Although it doesn't matter, or it doesn't matter at all. But criticism is always warranted. Sometimes the conversation goes a little further, and it means that a cousin or the like is engaged to be married to her in-laws, or the daughter of a relative is getting married. Or something that I heard or heard about, such as the bride and her new brother-in-law were having trouble. At that time, there were already foreign schools in our county. There are several in primary schools, but none in universities. There is only one boys' middle school, and it often becomes the target of discussion. When talking about this, not only Aunt Shui, grandma, aunts, sisters, etc. are willing to talk about the students of this local middle school. Because they are all westernized, wearing trousers and rolling up the trouser legs an inch. They speak Mao Ning's foreign dialect, and they answer each other's questions whenever they speak. I heard that this is some kind of mousy dialect. What's even more strange is that they are not shy when meeting women. In this regard, everyone criticized that it was not as good as before. In the past, scholars would blush whenever they saw a woman. Good morning. The transliteration of English good morning means good morning. Editor's note. Da, the transliteration of Russian da, means yes, right. Editor's note. My family is the most open-minded. My uncle and brother have gone to major places like Beijing and Harbin to study. Their horizons were opened a lot, and when they returned home, they talked about how their classmates were all boys and girls. This topic was very novel, and at first everyone thought it was a rebellion. Later, my uncle also often corresponded with female classmates, because he had some status in the family. Moreover, my father had joined the Kuomintang and had been involved in the revolution, so the family was reforming and reforming. Therefore, everything in my family is very casual. We go to the park together and watch the lanterns on the 15th day of the first lunar month, regardless of gender. And I have a tennis court at home, and I play tennis all day long. When a boy from a relative's family came, we also beat him together. Regardless of this, let's talk about Aunt Shui. Aunt Shui has heard many stories about the marriage of male students. There have been several unfortunate things in our county. Some got married and never went home, and some married wives. He put his wife in another room, and he always lived in the study. Whenever these stories are told, most people will take the side of the woman, saying that the man is a bad student, and they will get angry when they see that the illiterate person is not a female student. I feel inferior to him everywhere. People always say that marriage is not free. But since ancient times, fathers and mothers have been married to each other. But today, they all have to be free. Look, there is no freedom yet. The story comes first. People who marry wives are not free. Go home or put your wife in another room. These are all caused by studying. Aunt Shui has listened to many other people's comments. She probably felt a little unfair in her heart, so she asked me if it was bad for me not to study, and I naturally said that it was bad. And she saw that all the boys and girls in our family go to school. Moreover, the children of our relatives are also studying. So she admired me very much because I studied. But soon, Aunt Shui got engaged. It happened not long after her sister got married. Her future husband, I met at my grandfather's house. He is tall and small, wearing a blue cotton robe and a black mandarin jacket. On his head is a 5-eared hat worn by those who drive carts. Aunt Shui was there at that time, but she didn't know who she was, so she just thought that such a guest from the country came from somewhere. My grandmother secretly called me over and told me that this was Aunt Cui's future. On his head is a 5-eared hat worn by those who drive carts. Aunt Shui was there at that time, but she didn't know who she was, so she just thought that such a guest from the country came from somewhere. My grandmother secretly called me over and told me that this was Aunt Cui's future husband. Soon Aunt Shui became very rich, and her husband's family was much richer than her sister's husband's family. My mother-in-law is also a widow, raising an only son. My son is only 17 years old and is studying in a private school in the countryside. Aunt Shui's mother often explained to Aunt Shui that it doesn't matter if she is shorter. He is still young, and in 2 or 3 years he will be as tall as 2 people. I advise Aunt Shui not to be sad, as long as her husband's family is rich. The betrothal gift of more than 100,000 yuan was handed over, and it was handed over to Aunt Shui personally by my grandmother's hand, and there were other conditions to guarantee it, that is to say, they are absolutely not allowed to get married within 3 years. On the pretext that the man is too young, Aunt Shui is more willing to push him away. Aunt Shui has become very rich since she got engaged. Even if she doesn't necessarily rush to buy something new when it arrives, it won't take long. It's going to be in the box. At that time, silver gray city cloth blouses were the most popular in summer, and Aunt Shui's ones were the best because she had several of them. After wearing them twice, she would discard them if they were no longer fresh. She would only wear them at home, and make another one when she went out. Pieces new. At that time, a kind of long tassel earrings was popular. Aunt Shui has 2 pairs, 1 pair of rubies and 1 pair of green ones, while my mother only has 2 pairs, and I only have 1 pair. It can be seen that Aunt Shui is very generous. At that time, high heels had already become popular. But not many people wear them in our street. Only my stepmother started wearing them a long time ago. The rest is Aunt Shui. It's not necessarily because my mother is rich, nor is it necessarily because high heels are expensive, it's just that women don't behave in such a modern way, or that they are not easily receptive to new ideas. It was the first day that Aunt Shui wore high heels and she was still very unsteady when walking. But I got used to it the next day. On the 3rd day, that is to say, from then on, she ran very smoothly. And the way she walks is even cuter. We sometimes went to play tennis, and when the ball hit her face, she covered it with her racket. Otherwise she wouldn't be able to hit a ball in half a day. Because as soon as she came on the field, she stood on the white line and she was on the white line. When she stood on the grid, she was on the grid. She didn't move at all. Sometimes, she would stand with a tennis racket in hand and look at the scenery. Especially after everyone has finished playing tennis. Those who ate had gone to eat, and those who had washed their faces had gone to wash their faces. She was the only one standing in front of the short fence, looking at Harbin City in the distance. Once I went to visit with Aunt Shui. My stepmother's clan has a daughter-in-law. They are from the 8 banners, that is, the Manchus, and Manchus are very particular about spectacle. All the young daughters-in-law of the tribe must be present, and all of them are dressed up like flowers and jade. It seems that our Chinese society does not have such a prosperous social scene. Maybe at that time, I was a child and regarded everything as very prosperous, just women's clothes. All of them were dressed as solemnly as Western women do in nightclubs nowadays. They all wear embroidered coats. And they were from the 8 banners, so they all had no words under their coats. And it's very long. The color of the coats is mostly maroon, some are crimson, and some are rose purple. And the color of the embroidery on it. There are lotus flowers, roses, pine, bamboo, and plum blossoms. In a word, it is very prosperous. Their faces were all painted with white powder, and their mouths were all stained pink. Whenever a guest comes to the door, they will line up to greet him. They are all my aunts. One by one, they came forward to greet Aunt Shui and me. Aunt Shui has long been familiar with them. Some are called cousin-in-law, and some are called fourth sister-in-law. But to me, they are all the same, just like when I was a child. I played with paper figures cut out of floral paper. This one is the same as that one, there is no difference at all. They all wear damask robes, they all have white faces, and they all have very red lips. It was this time that Aunt Shui stole the show. She entered the room and sat down next to a large mirror. All the women suddenly came up to see her. Perhaps she had never been so beautiful. Today, everyone was shocked. In my opinion, Aunt Shui is not as beautiful as she used to be, but they said Aunt Shui is as beautiful as a newly bloomed wintersweet. Aunt Shui never wore rouge, and that day she wore a blue satin robe covered with gold flowers, prepared for her future bride. Aunt Shui asked them to gather around and watch. He became embarrassed, stood up, and seemed to want to run away. He took very brave steps and dodged towards the inner room in a daze. Who knew that there was a new house there? So many sisters-in-law shouted in an uproar, saying, "Sister Shui, don't worry, you will be a beautiful bride next year, let's try it now." While eating and drinking that day, many guests came from other houses and stared blankly at Aunt Shui. Aunt Shui held up her chopsticks and seemed to be thinking about it. She kept a calm attitude and looked at them with gentle eyes. It was as if she didn't know that people were looking at her specifically. But the other women had been envious of Aunt Shui for a long time, and their faces suddenly became cold. They felt that they had something to say, but they didn't. Then they looked at each other, smiled, and started eating. March 4th in the small town. 4. One winter, just after the New Year, Aunt Shui came to my house. Uncle's son. My brother is at my house. My brother is very beautiful, with a straight nose, dark eyes, a nice mouth, and nicely combed hair. He is very long and walks briskly. Probably among all our families, there is no such beautiful person. In the winter, the school had a winter vacation, so I came to our house to rest. Probably soon, school will start and it will be time to go to school. My brother is studying in Harbin. Our concert will naturally be held for this new character. Aunt Shui also participated. It was very lively. My mother, for example, didn't know anything about this business, but she was also present, and she sat and watched. Even the cooks and female workers at home stopped working and looked at us, as if they were not listening to musical instruments but looking at people. We filled the living room. The sound of these instruments can probably be heard by neighbors far away. The neighbor came to visit the next day and said, "Last night. Who is your family celebrating their birthday? Let's just say that he is welcoming our brother who has just arrived. So our family is very fun and interesting. Soon it is the time to watch the lanterns on the 15th day of the first lunar month. Our family since my father's reform revolution, in short, in our family, brothers and sisters treat each other equally. If there is something interesting, let's play together. If there is something interesting, let's go see it together." My uncle took 8 or 9 of us, elder brother, younger brother, aunt, etc., and ran into the street in the big moon field. The road was so slippery that I couldn't stand on it, and it was uneven. The boys ran ahead and we fell behind because we were running slowly. So those in front turned around and laughed at us, calling us young ladies and empresses. Said we couldn't walk. Aunt Shui and we had already rushed forward in a row, but either I fell or she fell. In the end, my brother and the others came to support us one by one. It would be too weak to say that I was supporting them, but I was just moving forward in a row with them. Soon we arrived in the city, and the streets were full of lanterns. Crowds of people. In addition, lions, land boats, dragon lanterns, and Yanko dances were added, and it was so noisy that it was difficult to count how many things there were. Where will I have time to see it? It seems that it just flashed before my eyes and passed, and after a while something else came and passed again. In fact, it's not necessarily that prosperous, but I don't think it can be more prosperous than this in the world. In front of the store, there is such a big torch, like a big tropical coconut tree. One is brighter than the other. We entered a store owned by a friend of my father's. They entertained us very well, with tea, snacks, oranges and lantern festival. Where could we eat? When we heard drums playing outside the door, we became panicked. And there are so many drums and trumpets outside, one comes and the other has not gone away. It came again after a while. Because the city is not that big, there are many acquaintances, and I met them all who came to see the lanterns. Among them, several male students from our city studying in Harbin also came to see the lights. My brother knows them all. I know them too. Because at this time we went to Harbin to study. So as soon as they met us, they stayed with us, they went out to look at the lights, looked at them for a while, then came back to our place, talked to their uncle, talked to their brother. I know them because our family is relatively powerful. They are very willing to talk to us. So on the way home, there were 2 more boys. Whether people hate it or not, the clothes they wear are finally urbanized. Everyone was wearing suits and felt hats, and their coats reached to their knees, and their feet were neat and refreshing. Compared with the weird-looking coats in our city, it looks much better like a big cotton robe. Moreover, there is a scarf tied around the neck. The scarf is naturally made of full silk and full thread patterns. It seems that as soon as the scarf is tied up, the person looks more solemn and beautiful. Aunt Shui thinks they are all beautiful. My brother also wears a suit, so he looks good too. So she kept looking at her brother on the way. Aunt Shui combed her hair very slowly, making sure it was not messy. She also wiped off the powder, washed it off and then wiped it off until she was satisfied. On the second morning of the Lantern Festival, she combed her hair more slowly. I was thinking while combing my hair. According to the rules, for breakfast every day, she had to be invited 3 times and 2 times before she could attend. Today, she had to be invited 4 times before she came. My uncle was also a hero back then. He was absolutely good at riding horses and shooting guns. Later, although he was 50 years old, his style was still there. We all love Uncle. My uncle has loved us since he was a child. Poems, lyrics, and articles were all taught to us by our uncle. Aunt Shui lives in our house, and my uncle also likes Aunt Shui very much. Breakfast is already served today. I urged Aunt Shui several times, but she never came out. The uncle said, "Lin Daiyu." Then our whole family laughed. Aunt Shui came out. When she saw us smiling like this, she asked us why we were laughing. None of us would tell her. Aunt Shui knew that she must be laughing, so she said, "Tell me quickly. If you don't tell me, I won't eat today. I don't understand how you read and write. You are bullying me, dash." There was a lot of noise. It was my brother who told her. The uncle was a little embarrassed in front of his son, so he drank a lot of wine and finally got away. Aunt Shui then thought about studying, but she was already 20 years old. Where could she go to study? There were no students of her age in elementary school, so in middle school. She doesn't know a word, how can she do that? So still living in our house. We played the piano, the flute, and played cards all day long. When we played, everyone participated, my uncle, my brother, and my mother. Aunt Shui is not particularly nice to my brother. My brother is completely devoted to Aunt Shui just like he is to us. However, when my brother tells stories, Aunt Shui always listens more carefully than us. That is because she is slightly older than us. Of course, in terms of understanding, she is closer to some of our brothers than us. My brother is a little more polite to Aunt Shui than to us. When he talks to Aunt Shui, he always says, yes and yes, but when he talks to us, he always says, right and right. This is obviously because Aunt Shui is a guest and has a higher status than him. But one day after dinner, Aunt Shui and her brother were gone. There will probably be a concert every day after dinner. Maybe it was because my uncle was not at home on this day and there was no one to lead me. Everyone dispersed after eating. There was no one in the living room. I wanted to find my brother to play a game of chess with me, but he was also missing. So I played the organ alone in the living room. I didn't find it interesting after playing it for a while. The living room was very quiet, and after I closed the organ lid, I heard someone in the back room, or maybe in my house. I think Aunt Shui must be in the house. Go and see her quickly and ask her to come out and look at the cards. I ran in and took a look. Not only Aunt Shui, but also her brother accompanied her. When she saw me, Aunt Shui quickly stood up and said, "Let's go play." My brother also said, "Let's go play chess, let's play chess." They came out to play chess with me. My brother always lost this time. He had beaten me every time before. I felt strange, but I was very happy. Soon after the winter vacation ended, I went back to school in Harbin. But his brother didn't come with him because he got sick in the first half of the year and spent some time recuperating in the hospital. This time, his uncle suggested that he take another 2 months leave and stay at home. I don't know much about what happens at home in the future. They were all told to me by my brother or mother. After I left, Aunt Shui still lived at home. Later, my mother told her that before Aunt Shui got engaged, such an incident happened. There is a young uncle in my clan who is about the same age as my brother. He stutters and has no charm. I also study in the same school as my brother. Although he has also been to our house, I am afraid that Aunt Shui has never seen him. At that time, my grandmother advocated proposing marriage to Aunt Shui. The grandmother of that clan refused as soon as she heard it, saying that she was the son of a widow and had a bad life, and she was afraid that she would not have a tutor, not to mention that his father was dead. My mother is married again. A good girl will not marry a second husband. My grandmother does not want a daughter from this kind of family. But my mother said that because of the seniority, his family still had money, and Aunt Shui would be the first to marry her, and she would not be offended. Aunt Shui knows about this, and she met my brother again today. She couldn't help thinking that her brother probably looked at her that way. She consciously felt that her fate would not be good. Now Aunt Shui herself was engaged and was the fiancée of someone else. Secondly, she is the daughter of a married widow, and she has recited this lesson countless times a day. She remembered it clearly. March 5th in the small town. 5. Aunt Shui was engaged for 3 years. Just then, Aunt Shui's husband's family received news that Zhang Luo was getting married. Her mother came to take her back to arrange her trousseau. Aunt Shui fell ill as soon as she heard this. But within a few days, her mother took her to Harbin to buy a dowry. It happened that the guide who took her to buy the dowry was his classmate introduced by her brother. They live in Qinjiagang in Harbin, which has great scenery and is the place with the most foreigners. The male students' dormitory has heating and foreign beds. Aunt Shui brought a letter of introduction from her brother. I was treated by them like a female classmate. In addition, she has learned the rules of the Russians and respects women in every aspect, so of course Aunt Shui received a lot of respect from them, treating her to delicious meals and watching movies. When riding in a carriage, let her get in first, and when getting off, someone would help her down. Every time she moved, others served her, and as soon as she took off her coat, they took it over. As soon as she indicated that she wanted to wear a coat, it was put on for her. Needless to say, she was not happy buying a dowry, but those few days were the happiest time in her life. She feels that after all, people who are in college are nice and not barbaric. She will not be rude to women, and she will never beat her sister like her brother-in-law often does. After going to Harbin to buy a dowry, Aunt Shui became even more reluctant to get married. When she thought about that ugly and small man, she felt terrified. When she came back, her mother took her to live with us again. He said that her home was dark and cold, and that she was too lonely and pitiful. Our home is heated. Later, her mother discovered that she was too unenthusiastic about getting married, and she would not cut the clothes that should be cut. There were some odds and ends that needed to be bought, but she didn't buy them either. Mothers always need to supervise. Later, I had to take her back and bring her to her side so that I could remind her at any time. Her mother believed that young people must be reminded at all times, otherwise they will always be playful. And Quan's wedding day is not far away, maybe February or March. Unexpectedly, when her grandmother came to pick her up, she refused to go back. She was brave enough to put forward her request to study. She said she wanted to study and she didn't want to get married. At first, her grandmother refused, but later, she said that if she was not allowed to study, she would not get married. Her grandmother knew her feelings and remembered many terrible things. Grandma had no choice but to obey her. I invited an old man to stay at home for her, and he set up a desk in an empty house in his yard, and there were several neighbor girls who studied together. Aunt Shui studied during the day and returned to her grandmother's house at night. After studying, a few days later, I started to cough and feel depressed all day long. Her mother asked her what was wrong with her. Were you unhappy with the dowry items? Or do you want to go to our house to play? Asked about everything. Aunt Shui shook her head and said nothing. Some days later, my mother went to see Aunt Shui and took my brother with her. When they saw her, their first impression was, I feel like she looks a lot paler. Moreover, the mother asserted that she would not live long. Everyone said that she was tired from studying, and my grandmother also said that she was tired from studying. It doesn't matter. Daughters who are getting married are always thin before they get married, and they will become fat after they get married. Aunt Shui herself nodded, smiled, and refused to admit it. Nor deny it. She was still studying and didn't come to our house. My mother picked me up several times but never came, saying she didn't have time. Aunt Shui was getting thinner and thinner. My brother went to his grandmother's house to visit her twice, only to eat, drink and socialize. And he said he was going to see his grandmother. Young man here. It is not allowed to visit young women. When my brother came back, he didn't bring any joy or new melancholy. He still played cards and chess with everyone. Aunt Shui couldn't support it anymore and lay down. Her mother-in-law heard that she was ill and wanted to marry her because she spent money. Wouldn't it be a pity to die? After hearing this kind of news, Aunt Shui's illness became even more serious. As soon as her husband's family heard that she was seriously ill, they immediately wanted to marry her. Because there is such a chapter in superstition that the sick bride will be married as soon as she marries her. After hearing this, Aunt Shui just wanted to die quickly and tried her best to destroy her body, hoping to die as quickly as possible. Mother remembered Aunt Shui and asked her brother to go see Aunt Shui. It was my mother who sent my brother there. My mother took some money and asked my brother to give it to Aunt Shui, saying that it was her mother who sent her to buy whatever she wanted to eat while she was sick. Mother knew that young people like them were very rigid, or they might be too embarrassed to visit Aunt Shui. Or maybe Aunt Shui really wanted to see him, and they couldn't see him for a long time. At the same time, Aunt Shui was unwilling to get married, and her mother had been suspicious of them for a long time. It is not good for a man to interview a young lady. There is no such custom in this city. The mother gave the brother a gift, and the brother could go. On the day her brother went there was no one in her house. Only her cousin took care of this strange young guest whom she had never seen before. The cousin's sister ran out before she could find out the origin of the guest, saying she was going to see their grandfather and asked him to wait. She probably thought that all the male visitors came to see her grandfather. The guest only said his name, but the girl ran out without even listening. My brother was thinking, where is Aunt Shui? Or in the back room? Aunt Shui probably heard someone coming, so she said from inside, please come in. My brother went in. Sitting on Aunt Shui's pillow, he wanted to touch Aunt Shui's forehead to see if she had any fever. He said, are you feeling better? As soon as he stretched out his hand, Aunt Shui suddenly pulled his hand and started crying loudly, as if her heart was crying out. My brother was not prepared and was very scared. Don't know what to say or do. He didn't know whether he should protect Aunt Shui's status or his own status now. At the same time, I could hear someone coming outside, and they were about to open the door and come in. It must be Aunt Shui's grandfather. Aunt Shui smiled at him calmly and said, it's a good time for you to come. My sister must have told you to come. I will always remember her in my heart. She loved me so much, but it's a pity that I can't visit her anymore. I can't repay her. But I will always remember the days at her house. She may not have treated me well, but I think it was so good, I will never forget it. I don't know why now. I just want to die as soon as possible, and living one more day is unnecessary. People may think that I am willful. In fact, that is wrong. I don't know why, but that family is also very good to me. If I went there, they would be very nice to me, but I don't want to. When I was a child, I was not good at it. My temper was always disobedient, and I didn't want to. This temper has tortured me to this day. But how could I be able to follow my heart? It's a joke. Thank you, sister. She's still thinking about me. Please tell her that I am not as miserable as she thinks. I am also very happy. Aunt Shui smiled painfully. My heart is very quiet, and I got everything I asked for. The elder brother was at a loss and didn't know what to say when his grandfather came in. After seeing Aunt Shui's enthusiasm, I thanked my mother and felt honored for the arrival of my brother. He said, "Please don't worry about my mother. Aunt Shui's illness will be cured soon, and she will marry her as soon as she recovers." My brother saw Aunt Shui and left, never to see her again. My brother later mentioned that Aunt Shui often cried. He didn't know why Aunt Shui died, and everyone was also puzzled. The end of March in the small town. End. Wait until I get back from spring break. My mother also took it as my word. If Aunt Shui definitely doesn't want to get married, that's okay, if they take my word for it. The grass seeds on Aunt Shui's grave have sprouted, and they are sticking together with the soil. The grave shows a light green color, and white goats often run by the streets of the city at this time. Full of spring again. The warm sun has returned again. There are people selling dandelions in baskets on the street, and there are also people selling small roots of garlic. There are even some children who fold the newly sprouted wicker sticks according to the season, which can be twisted into whistles, and they hold them in their mouths and blow them all over the street. The sound is high or low. Because the whistle is thick and thin. In the streets and alleys, there was oh, oh, oh everywhere. It seems that spring has come back from their hands. But this was only for a short period of time. In a blink of an eye, the whistler disappeared. Then the poplar flowers flew up, and the elm money floated all over the ground. In my hometown, spring comes quickly. If you don't leave the house for 5 days, the tree will sprout. If you don't look at the tree for another 5 days, the tree will grow leaves. After another 5 days, the tree will look so green that no one recognizes it. It makes people think, is this tree the same tree as the day before yesterday? Answer yourself, of course yes. Spring seems to run so fast. As if people can see it. Spring came from a long way away. When it came to this place, it only blew a small voice into people's ears, "I'm here," and then ran over quickly. Spring seems to be so busy no matter how busy it is. It seems to be greeting it everywhere. If it arrives a moment later, the sunshine will change color. The earth will dry up into stone, especially the trees. It seems that we can't bear it for a moment longer. If the spring lingers for a moment, a lot of lives will be lost. Why doesn't spring come earlier and come to our city to stay longer? Then slowly move to another city and stay in another city for a few more days. But that is impossible, the fate of spring is so short. The young girls, in pairs, rode in carriages to choose clothing materials, because they were about to change into spring clothes. They were enthusiastically playing with scissors and patterning their clothes, trying to look as good as they imagined. They were busy day and night. Soon they changed into spring clothes, but the carriage carrying Aunt Shui was nowhere to be seen.